The sun had just begun to rise over the quiet fields of rural Texas. Soft golden light filtered through an old wooden window, gently brushing the floor of a small, silent kitchen. And there sat Mr. Thomas, 74 years old, alone, already awake for nearly an hour. Not because of habit, not because of energy, but because his body simply wouldn't let him sleep any longer. Every morning felt the same. He'd open his eyes and instantly feel the weight of aging. His legs heavy and numb, his back stiff like a plank. In his mind, foggy, distant, as if waking up in someone else's life. Thomas didn't fear aging itself. What he feared was waking up feeling weaker than the day before, feeling like he had no control anymore. And while many believed this was just a part of getting older, Thomas was about to discover something different, something powerful. A 5-minute morning shift that would soon bring back his energy, sharpen his memory, and restore a kind of strength he hadn't felt since his fire. But at that moment, all he wanted was to feel normal again. And he had no idea that the turning point was already waiting, right there in the very first 5 minutes of his morning. For years, Mr. Thomas thought this was normal. Waking up in pain, moving slowly, forgetting where he put his glasses. Friends would tell him, that's just what happens when you get older. But no one ever explained why he felt worse after waking up, why his legs were heavier, why his balance seemed off, or why it took hours just to feel alert again. He didn't realize that the first 5 minutes after opening his eyes were silently working against him. You see, after the age of 65, the body changes in quiet but powerful ways. Circulation slows overnight. Muscles begin breaking down faster, and the brain takes longer to reboot. That's why so many older adults feel foggy in the morning, why getting out of bed feels risky, why small slips turn into dangerous falls. But here's the truth that most people never hear. What you do in the first few minutes each morning can either protect your heart, brain, and strength for years to come, or slowly pull them away without warning. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't hurt, and that's exactly why it's so often ignored. Thomas had ignored it too, until the day someone close to him opened his eyes and showed him a simple 5-minute routine that changed everything. What happened next was the beginning of something truly powerful. One quiet Sunday morning, as the light crept softly across the kitchen table, Mr. Thomas heard a knock on his screen door. It was his granddaughter Emily, home from her final year of nursing school, carrying a paper bag and a warm smile. She had always cared deeply for her grandfather, but this time, she looked at him differently. She noticed the way he moved slower, how he rubbed his hands just to feel the warmth, how his voice paused, as if trying to remember what came next. She didn't say much at first, just sat with him, made tea, listened. Then, gently, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper, handwritten, 5 simple steps, written in blue ink. This is something I've been studying, a morning routine we've been testing with older adults who struggle with energy and memory. It's gentle, natural, only 5 minutes, but the results are promising. Mr. Thomas looked at the paper, then back at her. He didn't laugh. He didn't resist. He simply nodded. Because deep down, he already knew something had to change. He had nothing to lose. And maybe, just maybe, this quiet list from a girl who still believed in him could be the thing that finally gave him back a little of what he'd lost. What followed over the next few mornings would surprise even him. The very next morning, Mr. Thomas opened his eyes and reached for the paper on his nightstand. Step 1 was simple. Drink 1 glass of room temperature water with a squeeze of lemon. Before coffee, before breakfast, before anything else. At first, it seemed too small to matter. Just water, just lemon. But what he didn't realize was that overnight, his body had lost nearly half a liter of water through breathing and sweat. And that silent dehydration was making his blood thicker, his heart work harder, his brain slower to wake up. The instructions were clear: 16 ounces, room temperature, not cold, because cold water could tighten blood vessels, slow circulation, and right after waking up, that was the last thing he needed. The lemon wasn't just for taste, it added natural electrolytes, a touch of potassium, and just enough vitamin C to help the arteries relax and the blood pressure steady. As the water slid down his throat, he felt something he hadn't expected. A sense of clarity, a small spark, like his system had just switched on. No pills, no pressure, just water. Yet somehow, it felt like the beginning of something real. And that was only the first step. After finishing his water, Mr. Thomas sat at the edge of his bed. The next instruction asked him to spend just 60 seconds moving gently to help his blood flow. He had never thought about circulation before, never imagined that sleeping all night could cause blood to pool in his legs and slow down oxygen to his brain. But that's exactly what had been happening. The paper said to stand with his feet shoulder-width apart, raise both arms slowly while taking a deep breath in through the nose, then lower them gently while breathing out through the mouth. It felt awkward at first, but strangely calming. Next, he rolled his shoulders backward 5 times, then forward 5 more. Then came 10 slow heel raises, lifting his heels, lowering with control. The movement was simple, but each action was like pumping life back into his body. By the end of the minute, he felt different. A little warmer, a little steadier. His balance felt more grounded, his head clearer. And though it took only 1 minute, it gave him something powerful. The feeling that his day had truly begun. Not with stiffness, not with strain, but with intention. This small sequence would soon become his favorite part of the routine. And the next step would give his muscles the fuel they'd been quietly waiting for. Within 30 minutes of waking, Mr. Thomas moved on to the third step. It was the one his granddaughter said most people miss, a simple truth that surprised him. The body needs protein not just during the day, but especially in the early morning. After the age of 65, the body enters a phase between 3 and 8 a.m., where muscle breakdown increases quietly, relentlessly. If no protein is available, the body begins taking it from its own muscle, slowly weakening itself day after day. For years, Mr. Thomas thought a cup of coffee and toast was enough, but now he understood why his legs felt weaker, why getting out of a chair felt harder than it used to. So that morning, he followed the advice. 1 scoop of high-quality protein mixed into a small glass of almond milk. Smooth, simple, easy on the stomach, and most importantly, right on time. He didn't feel a sudden burst of energy, but over the days that followed, his body began to respond. He felt steadier, less shaky, more in control. His appetite changed too. He no longer craved sugar by mid-morning. He didn't feel drained before noon. This one small act, done within 30 minutes of waking, was quietly rebuilding what years had slowly taken away. And now that his muscles were fueled, the next step would help them move again, freely, without fear. By now, Mr. Thomas had completed the first 3 steps. His body was hydrated, his circulation was flowing, his muscles had the fuel they needed. But there was still something missing. Movement, gentle, purposeful, designed to help his joints loosen before the day began. The 4th step was a short mobility sequence, 90 seconds of simple motion to warm the joints and protect them from stiffness or strain. He sat on the edge of the bed and began by rotating his ankles, 10 slow circles to the right, then 10 to the left. Next, he placed his hands on his knees and gently moved them in small circles, warming the knees, reminding them it was safe to move. Then he stood carefully, holding onto the bed for balance, and leaned side to side, 5 times each way, feeling the stretch along his lower back and waist. He finished with 10 slow shoulder rolls, backward, smooth, controlled. Each movement felt like waking up an old part of his body that had been asleep too long. There was no pain, no force, just movement, guided by breath, supported by awareness. When he finished, something had shifted. His steps felt lighter, his back less tight, his balance more secure. And with each passing day, this short routine began to restore a freedom he thought was gone. But while the body was now ready to move, there was still one final step, one that didn't focus on muscles or joints, but on the most powerful organ of all, the mind. The final step on Emily's list was just 1 minute long, but Mr. Thomas would come to see it as the most powerful of them all. It didn't involve the body, not the heart, not the muscles, it was about the mind. As he sat quietly in his chair, eyes still adjusting to the soft morning light, he followed her simple instruction. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and begin to recall the day before. Not in order, but in reverse. Dinner, the walk before sunset, the book he picked up around noon, the phone call in the late morning. At first, it was difficult. Details came slowly, but with each breath, the memories flowed more easily. A smile here, a scent there, the sound of a bird he had forgotten until now. This small act of reflection was more than memory. It was a mental stretch, a quiet exercise that scientists now link to higher levels of brain protective proteins, like BDNF, a substance the brain releases when gently challenged to recall and connect. Emily had written that just 60 seconds of this kind of mental recall could help reduce age-related cognitive decline, strengthen focus, and preserve clarity well into the later years of life. Mr. Thomas didn't know the science, but he felt something shift, a sense of calm, a quiet pride, a growing awareness that his mind was still capable, still sharp, still his. And with that final breath, his 5-minute routine was complete. A beginning, not just for his body, but for the part of him that mattered most. Now, for the first time in years, Mr. Thomas was ready to live his day, not from weakness, but from strength. The first few days felt subtle, nothing dramatic, but something inside Mr. Thomas had shifted. He woke up with more ease, his hands didn't shake when holding his cup of tea, his steps were less cautious, more grounded. By the end of the first week, his mornings no longer felt like a fight. He didn't have to sit on the edge of the bed for 5 minutes just to feel steady. His legs carried him without hesitation. His breath came easier. There was one morning when he reached for the broom on the back porch and swept the fallen leaves without thinking, not because someone told him to, but because he felt like moving. He felt like doing. Even his granddaughter noticed. She said his voice had more strength, his eyes looked clearer, he was starting to tell stories again, stories he hadn't thought about in years. These weren't miracles, they were signals. Small signs that the body remembers how to heal when given a chance. And it all began not with medication, not with machines, but with 5 quiet minutes at the start of each day. Mr. Thomas didn't feel younger. He felt more present, more alive, and that was more than enough. But what was happening inside his body was just as remarkable as what he felt on the outside. While Mr. Thomas was simply following 5 quiet steps each morning, science had already confirmed the power behind each one. Decades of research from leading institutions like Harvard, Stanford, and the Mayo Clinic had pointed to the same truth: that the earliest minutes of the day play a critical role in aging, in how the brain functions, in how the heart performs, in how the muscles are preserved or lost. Hydration upon waking helps reduce the thickness of the blood, lowering morning stroke risk, improving circulation, and easing the load on the heart. This has been shown in multiple cardiovascular studies from the Cleveland Clinic. Gentle movement within the first 60 seconds can redistribute pooled blood from the legs, aiding balance, increasing alertness, and even improving mood. Johns Hopkins researchers found that this simple act reduced early morning dizziness in adults over 65 by more than 40%. Consuming protein within the first 30 minutes of the day is now considered essential for older adults. The National Institute on Aging reports that seniors who time their morning protein intake see up to 60% less muscle loss over 5 years compared to those who delay breakfast or skip it entirely. Mobility work helps lubricate joints by stimulating synovial fluid. This reduces microdamage, prevents stiffness, and lowers long-term arthritis risk. And short mental recall exercises, like remembering the day in reverse, have been shown to trigger BDNF production, the very protein that protects neurons, builds new brain connections, and slows cognitive decline. This is supported by ongoing trials from the Brain Longevity Center at Stanford. All 5 steps, backed by data, honored by experience proven in people like Mr. Thomas. But perhaps the most powerful proof of all was not in the numbers, but in the way he now greeted each day. Mr. Thomas never thought he would feel this way again. Stronger, calmer, more in control of his mornings. Not because he reversed time, but because he chose to change how his day began. And now, this quiet shift belongs to you as well. Maybe you felt like he once did, slow to rise, clouded in thought, a little less sure of your steps with each new day. Maybe your mornings feel like something to get through instead of something to begin. But the body has memory, the mind has power, and you still have time. This isn't about doing everything perfectly. It's about doing one thing intentionally. Maybe it's the water, maybe it's the breathing, maybe it's just sitting for a moment and remembering what you lived yesterday. You don't have to change your life all at once. You just have to begin gently, quietly, like Mr. Thomas did. Because 5 minutes is not too much, and your health is not too far gone, and your mornings are not over. They may, in fact, just be beginning again. For Mr. Thomas, 5 minutes in the morning became more than a routine. It became a promise on a quiet way to remind himself each day that his health was still in his hands. Not every day was perfect. Some mornings were slower than others, but the difference was clear. He was no longer drifting through his mornings. He was meeting them. With a clear mind, a steady step, a heart that didn't feel rushed or worn down. What he discovered was not a secret. It was a return. A return to listening to his body, to honoring the moment he opened his eyes, to realizing that age may take time, but it doesn't have to take away the power to choose. And now that gift belongs to you, not through medication, not through complexity, but through 5 simple steps in the 5 most important minutes of your day. If this story has touched you, try one step tomorrow morning. And if it helps, share this with someone you care about. It might just give them a new morning too.